Ladies and gentlemen, if it's all right with you, even as you walk and digest your 95th donut, I'm going to start. Is that all right? Can I just please check that your phones are on silent? Can I take a quick read of the room? Who had a fruitful session? Who enjoyed? Who takes away 1, 2, 3 golden nuggets of something new or interesting from their parallel session? Come on, really? Then you were too much on your phones, or you were ordering dinner, or you were tweeting about something else, I don't know. Okay, so if you can all come and settle, please. We're going to do a kind of a punchy and dynamic top lines feedback from those 4 sessions. Okay, so here are the 4 moderators. Here with me I have, thank you so much. Thank you. János Bertok, who is the Deputy Director of Public Governance at the OECD. So he was discussing, and apparently it was highly innovative. I love that, the discussion itself. Open data and digital technology to engage citizens. On his left, in this room, Adriana Suchova, who is Deputy Director General DG Employment, was looking at co-creation, one of the words that came up a lot, ownership, meaningful participation, all of that came up at the beginning of the day. On her left, we have Marie-Hélène Boulanger, who is at DG Justice, where she looks after citizenship democracy. And you were looking at mentoring, transparency, and accountability. So that was all about building trust through cooperation. And finally, looking at capacity building for both authorities and CSOs. And I sat in on the tail end of yours. We have from the JRC, its Deputy Director General, Charlina Vicheva. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think what we've agreed, and I hope that's fine with you, is that we're going to try and give back feedback in a way that's quite coherent for all of you. So you were all asked, to the extent that it can be answered, what was the topic that created the most energetic debate, or the issue that really got people fired up? And 3 recommendations. You've got many members of the upcoming panel here. So what would your recommendations be in the area, the topic you were moderating, for that panel to consider when we're talking about engaging citizens? So the first 3 minutes, sir, János, no pressure, are yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and this was a very, very interactive and very self-critical, very open discussion about open data and use of the digital technology. And the result, I would say the first consensus in that sense, how this open data promise, the open data revolution, was disappointing. Didn't deliver the promising. And of course, what were the reasons? And one concrete aspect was that although the quality, fundamentally the amount of information increased substantially, but the quality of the information is not there.
Okay.
And in that sense, we live in the digital age, and these are, the expectations are high. So how governments, citizens, they can properly collect, store, and also present structure the information.
Okay, okay. So that was the topic that was most sort of got people fired up? Yep, okay. And the quality is also because the type of data that's been collected at the outset, it's not being thought through? So the mechanism isn't right, or the time isn't being taken to do the right thing with that data, because it takes time, or both?
This was an excellent point, because there were many examples how the data collection followed bureaucratic administrative processes.
Right.
And how this can be, for example, in procurement, which is a very lowest price administrative process, but how this can be used as a strategic tool and really support policy objectives, so environmental, but also using the life cycle, linking information to the interest, the well-being of citizens.
Okay. So what are those recommendations to these good people who will be on this last panel?
There were several recommendations. One of them is, of course, internally that improving the data quality is not only with the citizens and for the citizens, it's also with the government. So when there's a higher take-up, use of information, I mentioned the public procurement or any other administrative process, there's, again, a built-in process to provide higher quality information. So the other is how to use this information and how to go beyond traditional participation, consultation, and turn this engagement into action, so actual impact on the citizen's life.
Okay, and technology and data within that journey to actually transform it into policy? Was there discussion about how the two fit together, top lines?
There were several, again, very good ideas how to support this is really decentralization and bringing closer these services to the citizens, involving the citizens, but also discussion about what role for the European Union, the European institutions,
Right.
and including as a supranational level, the standardization of the data,
Sure.
developing skills, and supporting data gathering in certain, and this is happening, there are many very good examples like the cross-border cooperation, but at the same time the measurement.
Yeah.
How to provide these, I mean, this is the methodology and agreement, the consensus on what really matters and how to measure progress.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think that's very important, this issue of standardization, harmonization, how you treat it, but also indeed giving people the skills to be able to know what to do with it. And all data is not created equal. I think it's a little bit like sometimes when we talk about citizens, it's not a heterogeneous lump, neither is data. So we need to think about the groups of data, the kinds of data, how they serve people in very particular ways. But quality is obviously something that really came up for you there. Okay, quality rather than quantity. That's been something that's come up quite a lot today. Okay, I will leave that there. So, Andriana, who was in this room, that was very fitting because you did indeed pick up on all of those issues that had started in this room. So, was there something that got people quite hot under the collar or happily hot under the collar? And do you have some recommendations for the next panel?
In fact, we had a very interesting panel because we had people from the ground implementing projects at a very low local level. We had an NGO, which was really an engagement NGO, a citizen representative and also pushing for novelties. We had a university, we had the academic and analytical side of the process of co-creation, ownership and implementation. And we also had some view on the democracy and the developments in Europe. So I think that there were a lot of interesting topics, and I cannot say there is one topic that was most hot because colleagues in the room were quite active as well. But I would say that having the co-creation, the empowerment and the involvement as a continuous process and as a standard of behavior was coming up as one of the key things. We had some interventions from the floor, from local authorities, mayors. We had people from different institutions who were coming up with the ideas about how to reflect the democratic developments, how to make sure that we are transparent, we engage everyone in a meaningful way, because we need to have not only to start communicating what we do, involving people in the design of the policies, involving them in the implementation as well, and also make sure that citizens are co-designers and also co-creators of their future. So I think this is a very good message for our next panel. I also would underline that a cultural change and behavioral change is happening now, and there is more openness and more need and more demand for citizens to be involved at all levels, but also it's a two-way process.
Sure.
It's a readiness of authorities to be open to engagements of citizens, individuals, non-governmental organizations, and it's also up to the non-governmental organizations to react, to respond, and be ready to help. And there is clearly a need for more structured support for the capacity building of those who are ready to get involved.
Okay. Thank you. And I think in that we will hear possibly some overlaps with what was discussed. I'll come to you, Charlene, at the end, and especially this issue about mindsets. What's the nature of partnership? Or at least that's what I heard when I dropped in. One thing I did hear, just before I left the room, actually, Andriana, was somebody, I think it was the gentleman who was talking from the Scottish perspective, money, which hadn't come up this morning, but it was about financing. And I think there was also a lady on your panel who said, that's also a part of it, designing processes, but the funding thereof, which is something that hadn't really cropped up. So thank you very much. Continuous process, absolutely a standard of behaviour, and we heard that it needs to be a right this morning from one of our opening speakers. Citizen engagement should be a right. So I come to you now, Marie-Hélène. So you had a bit of a mouthful of a of a title of your session. So tell me, was there something got people going? And did you have some strong recommendations, or at least for the good people on the last panel to have a think about and to take further?
Thank you. A strong recommendation, I don't know, that's for you to see. Some of the points have already been said.
Right up there, because you are a beautifully soft speaker.
Yeah, so strong recommendation, and we will go that far. And also some of the points have already been mentioned. But we discussed transparency, accountability, and confidentiality. And what was clear is that there was a need to do more. More about how to communicate information, it has been mentioned already, but also some risk links to too much transparency were highlighted, which could be misused. Also,
Just give me an example of that. Did anybody give an...
It was civil society organizations. So
okay.
That's one point which has been made. It could be misused in some cases.
Okay.
To do more, also to address the root causes of distrust. So it's not only about participation, but there are root causes, and this was very important in our panel. And there, the Cohesion Fund could play a role. So, especially, for instance, regarding social economic factors, inequality, that no one should be left behind. Money, the funding is money, the funding is important, the trust about how money is spent is important, but there was also discussion about the sustainability of the engagement. So how do we keep this sustainable? Another important element was, and it was, I think, already mentioned in your panel, it's also about the role of civil society as an important factor for citizens' participation, but also as watchdogs for our democracies. And what was mentioned is the shrinking space for civil society in our European democracies. I still have two short points. One was the importance of dialogue. Laws are there. There are also a cultural dimension, but we need to create the space for dialogue to bridge the two elements, the regulatory framework, but also the cultural dimension, which was mentioned also as customs in our panel. Last but not least, the great importance of the local level. So clearly, it's much easier to associate citizens if we start from the local level, including in terms of transparency. And that's a key vector to have transparency at all levels, but we need to start with the local level.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, an example of, I mean, customs being addressed. You talked about the sort of the regulatory side of things, but the customs. So how did you understand that?
So what I understand, but the panelists should be in the room. You can definitely explain a bit more about that. But is that there are some principles in laws, for instance, which was mentioned, the GDPR and other legislation. But there are also custom, cultural tradition, and you need somehow to bridge the two. And that's the dialogue, the space for this dialogue, because it's not enough to have laws, you also need to take into account these customs and tradition, and you need the space for dialogue between the two.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to, just in case there's something burning, I mean, we'd have 2 minutes that anybody would want to say, no, I'm sorry, that was missing, and that was really important. You will have a chance to raise your hand, but let me come to you, please, Charlene, and tell me what did you really see happening? What got people going in your discussion?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, congratulations to Regio for organizing this event and attracting this very high-level presence. So this is extremely important that all levels are engaged. And I want to thank also all the participants in the breakout session and the very good panelists. So what our takeaways are is that the capacity building has to be targeted to someone. So to whom? Representativeness. Is it to only civil society organizations, or what type of communities of citizens that we have to target? What we concluded is that it's not that on everything everyone has to be questioned and listened to. So it's a no-go. But then the difficulty is how to construct the community which you have to train, teach, and provide with skills. When we talk about representativeness, the second point was that dichotomy between civil society organizations and citizens. So there shouldn't be any breaching element there. So there should be a bridge and not breaching the contract between the two. So one versus the other, or just layer over layer. So it is another point that was raised and has to be taken into account, especially during the partnership principle implementation for the next programming period. Then layers of public authorities, so layers of governance, and where the need is the highest. And what came out from the discussion is that the higher we distance ourselves from the citizens, the higher need for training and capacity building. So, for example, if we start from cities layer, then regions, we identified that probably the member states level needs most training and capacity, and even overcoming a bit of a distress in communicating and engaging, because these are two different things with citizens. And the last point that was debated was about the code of conduct for the partnership principle. It was a bit of a division. We haven't heard about it. Oh no, but it's such a nice code and we know it and the principle is so well developed. So obviously, probably for the next programming period, we need that this code is revitalized to be more dynamic, more fit for purpose, more made aware of. So these were the points that I took on board. Then the recommendations. With regards to capacity building, in order to implement partnership, the partnership principle, which is the key and underpinning the whole process, we need to establish collaborative skills, especially on the side of the public authorities. Because the public authorities have to be there neutral, and not only neutral, but perceived as neutral when they engage with citizens. So if the citizens sense a bias, of course, the trust cannot be built. Then the listening mode, not only unbiased, but also listening to the citizens, and then implementing and follow up to what they do. So this is another skill that needs to be established not as a one-off element for implementing a principle, but as a mentality, mindset, culture of the public administration. So neutrality, also coupled with a very tailored language, because if we start talking on our jargon, the citizens will simply not engage with us. So how to express, how to incite how to trigger the interest of the citizens to take part into this two-way engagement. And the last thing about the partnership and collaborative skills, no one should be a secondary partner. So it is very often that the citizens feel that they're kind of looked over. So we just tick the box. We embrace you. That was even said by the most democratic member of our panel, because that was a real organization, democracy, fit for democracy society, not just to be embraced for a while and then I go away. So really these are the genuine collaborative skills that are needed. Another second recommendation was a continuity, ongoing process. So whenever we build capacity, it has to really concentrate on an ongoing, continuous process of engaging. So how to do that? and it needs capacity building. Funding was there raised, the technical assistance probably, especially for the CSOs, the civil society organizations that are very often also project promoters. And last, if you allow me, if we go one level higher, both for public authorities, but also for citizens and for civil society, it's important this layer a fit for democracy mindset. So it's an ongoing training of each and every member of our society about what it is to be active citizen. So,
thank you. And I think that's the point where I came into the room where, I don't know which of you, forgive me, the name of your speaker, it was the lady at the far end nearest the door who was talking about, you know, it really is about that. It's about design the process, choose the participants, facilitate it, and fund it. And I think it was there very much. It's not, one shouldn't be seeking to hear everything from everyone all the time. So this issue of quality as opposed to quantity, which also came up in the data, and then throughout all of your sessions, this issue of sustainability, embedding at the right time, life cycle. I like that statement, citizens as watchdogs of democracy. That's an interesting comment there, and a mindset change, that it's there, but it's also, we heard this morning, ladies and gentlemen, that it's not just about saying, what can you do for me, public authority or government, but it's a process by which, when both come together in a true partnership, there is also better understanding of how there are some constraints, there are some difficulties, you know, at government level. I thought that was a very important point that came up this morning. So thank you very much. It's very telegraphic and needed to be, but any burning thing that didn't get said, ladies and gentlemen? Are you all broadly happy, or you've eaten so much sugar you couldn't even attempt to raise your hand? Okay, I think it's the latter. So could you please, A, for them just moderating, but B, having to feed back in so telegraphic a fashion, can you give them a very warm thanks, please? Thank you so much. You may take your seats.